Good evening, America. It is 7 p.m. Tuesday, July 21st, and this is Q News Tonight, the world's first live LGBT daily evening news. It is time to queer up the news.
Watch as we bring you these and other stories from the LGBTQ headlines. A grandfather blackmailed by 25-year-old Grindr hookup who threatened to out him to his family, and transgender Facebook content dominated by right-wing sources, study finds.
LGBTQ Backlash Beware 2020 sees an increase of 300% of violence and gun crimes in America. And Netflix ceases production in Turkey after government forbids gay storyline.
We also are joined by Dr. Howard Grossman for our weekly Q&A coronavirus facts for the LGBTQ community. And tonight, we introduce you to GLAAD's 20 Under 20. Stay tuned for some of the most interesting LGBTQ young people in America. Good evening, America. It's 7 p.m. Tuesday, July 21st, 2020, and it's time to queer up the news. We are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. So many of your stories we're going to tell this evening on Queer News Tonight. Tonight on the world's first live daily queer evening news show.
Tonight's news about the gay community and the news from an LGBTQ perspective. Are our gay stories important to you? In headlines, politics, entertainment, gay culture, travel, religion, and more. Reported by respected anchors.
Out of the closet and into the headlines on Q News Tonight. Thank you for joining Queer News Tonight. We are live, and this is an unedited show, so anything can happen. This evening, we bring you the news of and a perspective from the LGBTQ community. I'm your anchor, Al Ferguson, and this is my co-guest anchor, David Hopkins, and my co-guest anchor, Misty Eyes. Let's queer up the news. Tonight we begin the queer headlines. The LGBT community in America is diverse. The LGBTQ community around the world is vast, and we bring you the bullet points of queer news for today, Tuesday, July 21st, 2020. We begin with queering up the USA. LGBTQ backlash, beware. 2020 sees a 300% increase of violence and gun crime in America. Watch this.
From Los Angeles to Chicago to St. Louis, this summer is becoming the deadliest in memory.
Enough is enough. We're fighting the enemy within when we are shooting each other up on our streets.
Atlanta's mayor demanding an end to the violence after 8-year-old Sequoia Turner was shot and killed over the 4th of July weekend. But the gunfire has surged in Atlanta and many other cities across the country. Atlanta seeing a 300% spike in shooting victims the second week of July compared to the same time last year. In New York, shooting victims have skyrocketed 157% when compared to the same period last year. This month, 1-year-old Devell Gardner Jr. died in Brooklyn after being shot in the stomach while sitting in a stroller during a barbecue.
Even during a crippling pandemic, the raging gun epidemic that has long lingered in America grows stronger as 2020 rolls into its second half. The LGBTQ community, which has seen many hard-fought victories in recent times with marriage equality and earlier this summer with new job protections by the Supreme Court, is often therefore a victim of gun crimes or violence targeted by the far right, whose only excuse is fear and inherited bigotry. We must all remain vigilant in these times as there appears to be no signs that our elected officials plan to do anything about this until we force them to by voting the ones who choose inaction out.
This is a tough time for everybody. Tensions are high, people are locked up, people are frustrated, people are desperate for money. Crime is on the rise.
During the first part of COVID-19 quarantine, I kept thinking about the caged animals, and we have literally turned into caged animals.
Terrific observation, and the report on the 300% increase of violent crime in the United States, especially gun crime, was specifically pegged to that. The inaction of any gun laws by the federal government, but especially the response to COVID-19 and how people are beginning to react to it.
Next week, we're up sports. Hockey commentator claims NBC Sports firing was anti-straight discrimination. Hockey star Jeremy Roenick sued NBC Sports and its parent companies for wrongful termination on Friday, claiming the network discriminated against him as a straight man after he made off-color remarks on a Barstool Sports podcast. Roenick also alleges that the network retaliated against him because he was an outspoken supporter of President Trump in 2016. It's more likely due to his inappropriate quote involving his coworker, Catherine Tappan. Quote, "I'm swimming with my wife and Catherine, and they've got their bikinis on, and they look fucking smoking," he said in the podcast in December. Quote, "Ass and boobs everywhere. It's great."
This story doesn't even make sense to me. I don't have a thought or opinion, but I will say there's no such thing as anti-straight pride.
And anti-straight discrimination. It's so interesting to me that somebody would make the decision that because they were sexually provocative in their language or actions, that is anti-straight. It's a very strange world we're currently living in.
When you work in a professional environment, you need to behave professionally. You can't just be like, "Oh yeah, look at those titties jiggling." I mean, our show we could probably get away with it, but not NBC Sports.
Next week, we're at Vote 2020. Joe Biden says 4 black women are in the running to be his vice president. Watch this.
Most African Americans that I've talked to on a daily basis are very concerned that, black women in particular have been the heartbeat of the Democratic Party for a long time, really shored you up in places like South Carolina. Are you committed to naming a black woman as your vice presidential running mate?
I am not committed to naming any but the people I've named, and among them there are 4 black women. So that decision is underway right now. And by the way, black women have supported me my entire career. You all act like all of a sudden there was an epiphany in South Carolina. I have had over a 96%, 94% rating in the state with the 8th largest black community in the United States of America, Delaware.
Most African
Joe Biden's vice president pick is on everyone's mind, and people rumored to be considered for Biden's vice presidential pick include Senator Kamala Harris of California, Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms of Atlanta, Representative Val Demings of Florida, Representative Karen Bass of California, the former National Security Advisor Susan Rice, and former Georgia governor candidate Stacey Abrams. Biden said in the interview with Joy Reid on MSNBC that his popularity with the black community predated the South Carolina primary, which he won in February with a strong appeal to black voters.
I watched that interview with Joy Reid, by the way. Congratulations. Was the launch last night. Did a fantastic job. Biden admitted to Joy Reid that he's narrowed down his choices to approximately 6 candidates, 4 of which are black women.
I'm excited to see who he picks. It's going to make a huge difference in history if it's a black woman.
I like all the people that he mentioned, especially Val Demings.
We Queer Up the USA in reporting Trump says federal officers in Portland have done a great job, and he is considering Chicago next. Watch this.
As the crowd rushed toward the courthouse here in Portland, officers responded with tear gas again. President Trump says more federal agents could soon be coming to other cities.
We're looking at Chicago, too. We're looking at New York. Look at what's going on. All run by Democrats.
A Department of Homeland Security memo obtained by CBS News shows the agency preparing to deploy officers to a number of cities, which could include Kansas City and Albuquerque. But first up is Chicago, where they'll send 175 agents.
And I'll be darned if I'm going to let anybody, even if their name is Mr. President, bring those kind of troops to our city.
Authorities for several federal agencies have been sent to Portland to quell protests around the federal courthouse. But the presence of the federal officers led to violent clashes over the weekend, leading to Oregon officials asking them to leave the city. We recently obtained a memo showing that the Trump administration is planning to send 175 federal officers to assist local police departments in Chicago, with Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Kansas City, Missouri possibly next. Chicago's LGBTQ mayor, Lori Lightfoot, told reporters she had great concerns about the report, particularly given the track record in Portland. We don't need federal agents without any insignia taking people off the street and holding them, I think, unlawfully. And that's not what we need, Lightfoot said.
This whole thing is just the Trump himself trying to emulate Putin and his other dictator friends, and it's disgusting.
We are not a communist country. We do not need our leaders and government taking over.
I can't get over that they pull up in Tinker Toys. Oh, I mean Ford and Chevy vans.
Mm-hmm. Next week, we're up gay culture. Grandfather blackmailed by 25-year-old Grindr hookup who threatened to out him to his family. Kieran Thurling was handed a 20-month sentence, suspended for 2 years, after threatening to out the man to his wife, children, and grandchildren unless he paid him. The victim, who has not been named, had been exploring his sexuality on the hookup app when he met Thurling. The two had sex around 8 times before Thurling warned the victim he would put up posters outing him around Devon, where they both live, unless they gave him a £400 for his silence. Thurling was caught, however, when police set up a sting and lured him with the promised money at a set location where the arrest was made.
I have heard stories in the past where LGBTQ people of different body shapes than conventional beauty have been blackmailed because they send nude pictures to people online. I'm glad that this person came forward and people are being punished, and I hope that this sets a precedent that you can't blackmail people through LGBTQ platforms.
I think that this is largely a significant problem in the LGBTQ community, especially the separation of consenting gay men in age difference. Extortion is extortion, and no matter how you cut it, if you extort somebody, you're going to pay, both legally and in terms of backlash from everyone else, because Queer News Tonight is going to report it.
Yeah, this is a perfect example of basically a con artist trying to extort an elderly divorcee who was just looking for affection.
Next week, we're up the USA. Belong To launches online group supporting LGBTQ youth to learn about their community. Belong To is launching a brand new online youth group to provide a space where LGBTQ people between the ages of 14 and 23 can become familiar with the service and learn about their community. On July 20th, Belong To launched a new project to support LGBTQ youth who may not have been in a youth group ever before. Over the course of 4 weeks, this online space offers young people a chance to engage with the support service and grow confidence through participation.
We queer up the USA in reporting first ever homeless shelter for transgender Americans is set to open in New Orleans. Watch this.
Thank you so much for having me. So yes, the House of Tulip, also known as Trans United Leading Intersectional Progress, is so very important because we know that at some point, 1 in 3 Louisianians who are TGNC or trans or gender nonconforming will experience homelessness. I myself have experienced homelessness. I've also, as a result of that homelessness, I've been a sex worker to support myself when I've been discriminated against with trying to find housing and employment. So this is why this project is so dear to my heart, but also my co-director, Milan Sherry's heart. She's also experienced, and our journeys are very similar.
The House of Tulip, a community land trust, has been fundraising to buy property in Louisiana that can be converted into safe housing for homeless, transgender, and gender non-conforming people. Over $280,000 has been raised so far of the target of $400,000, and the founders told local media over the weekend that they placed a bid on some housing in New Orleans. According to the fundraiser, the plan isn't an emergency shelter or a transitional living house. It is a long-term investment in housing solutions. As members of our community gain stability through housing, they'll have a path to ownership.
Next week, Queer Up Entertainment. LGBTQ characters in film reach record high, but racial diversity trends downward. LGBTQ representation in films from major studios is at an all-time high, but racial diversity has dropped and transgender representation continues to be non-existent. That's according to the 8th Annual Studio Responsibility Index from LGBTQ media advocacy organization GLAAD, which analyzed 118 films from the 8 highest-grossing film studios of 2019 and 4 of their subsidiaries. GLAAD found that of the 118 films released in 2019, 22 of them, which is 18.6% of the films, included LGBTQ characters, an increase from the 18.2, which was 22 out of 110 films in 2018. Of the 22 films that featured LGBTQ characters, only 34% of those characters were LGBTQ people of color, down from 42% in 2018 and 57% in 2017.
Next week, we're up entertainment. Netflix ceases production in Turkey after government forbids gay plot. A gay character in a teen comedy drama is causing quite the dust storm in Turkey over a censorship controversy. Earlier this month, it was reported that Turkey's state broadcasting regulator was looking to censor Netflix's Love 101 for the presence of leading gay character in the series named Osman. They pressured the streaming giant to rewrite the character storyline from the show. Even though Osman engages in no physical acts of intimacy, what began as a standoff with the Turkish government may result in Netflix pulling production out of the country altogether. Netflix withdrawing from the country could completely be a big hit for the Turkish economy. The country currently has over 1.7 million users, and Netflix spends millions on producing original Turkish series that are exported around the world.
We queue up and queer up the USA in reporting, who is Edmund Pettus, and is it time to change the bridge to John Lewis? Watch this.
Instead of him being recognized for whoever he was as a U.S. Senator for Alabama in the Confederacy, he is now known, and his name is now attached to voting rights, to civil rights, to voting equity, to freedom.
We can't have it. He was a Confederate leader. No, we should not be honoring him.
Paperwork documents say he was also part of the Ku Klux Klan. Wes telling me the name makes her cringe, especially since her family was part of the movement.
My grandfather, Lonzy West, he was actually on the bridge for Bloody Sunday, and he was chased back to GWC Homes, and he could have been killed.
The death of Representative John Lewis on Friday has renewed interest in a campaign to rename the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, the site of a turning point in the fight for civil rights. Named after a former Confederate general and Ku Klux Klan leader, the bridge became the focus of national attention on March 7, 1965, when Alabama state troopers beat John Lewis and other demonstrators who were marching for black voting rights in what became known as Bloody Sunday. It is long past time for such a decision, and we can only hope that Mr. Lewis's impact will remain as strong in death as it was in life.
Next, we queer up gay culture. Transgender Facebook content dominated by right-wing sources, study finds. Over the course of a year, anti-trans Facebook posts earned more engagement than positive and neutral trans content combined, Media Matters for America found. That means the majority of Facebook interactions with those viral posts, over 43 million of 66 million shares, comments, and reactions over the span of a year, were items posted by anti-trans websites. Hate is powerful, unfortunately, and we here at Queer News Tonight will continue to monitor these types of statistics with the hope that we can be part of positive change going forward.
Next, let's catch up on all the news surrounding COVID-19 with our segment called Quarantine Quickies. The first story tonight is our daily reporting of the coronavirus facts, especially important to the LGBTQ community. First, we report on the coronavirus case numbers based on the standard acceptance of 7% of population being the LGBTQ community. The world's LGBTQ COVID-19 cases stand at 1,047,438, while America's LGBTQ COVID-19 cases stand at 279,003. We remind you that America continues to be ground zero of the pandemic. The USA is just 4.4% of the world's population, and today America is 26.6% of the world's cases. Next, we report on coronavirus deaths. The world's LGBTQ COVID-19 deaths stand at a staggering 43,099, while America's LGBTQ COVID-19 deaths stand at 10,100. The USA is 23.4% of all of the world's deaths.
Quarantine Quickies. Trump says coronavirus briefings will return and calls wearing a mask patriotic. Watch this.
President Trump said coronavirus briefings are making a comeback, in part because they were so popular.
I was doing them, and we had a lot of people watching, record numbers watching.
But the president stopped holding them at the end of April as polls showed they were hurting him politically, and after he received sharp criticism for asking this question about disinfectants.
And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning?
Mr. Trump has also been accused of using the briefings to campaign. Rallies have been limited because of the pandemic.
We have had this big flare-up in Florida, Texas, a couple of other places.
And after months of downplaying the importance of face coverings.
You can do it, you don't have to do it, I'm choosing not to do it.
President Trump tweeted this photo, writing, "Many people say that it is patriotic to wear a face mask. There is nobody more patriotic than me, but he's only worn a mask once in public." Meanwhile, another potential
In a stunning turnaround in both policy as well as demeanor, Donald Trump announced on his favorite platform, Twitter, that wearing a mask is patriotic, and the White House now fully supports wearing masks after months of the president refusing to do so. In a move that is to be celebrated, many are pointing to the president's slipping poll numbers as a reason for the sudden shift in safety during the pandemic, as a cause for both the mask change as well as returning to daily briefings about the spread of COVID-19. It's a positive change to be sure, but critics of the president question his motives.
You know, it's funny. He can wear a mask one time, and now he's suddenly a huge mask fan. He holds up a picture of him with Goya products, and suddenly he's a huge Latino lover.
What president of the United States says, I'm the most patriotic person of all people ever created? Also, I'm thrilled that the 5 o'clock briefings are coming back because it'll give us rich content here at Queer News Tonight.
Yeah. And I love how almost only hours after tweeting that he should wear a mask because it's patriotic, he didn't wear a mask out in public. So are you not patriotic now, Mr. President?
Quarantine Quickies. No one wants to be Florida right now. DeSantis' response has been shameful. Watch this.
Governor announced he is limiting social gatherings to 10 people, announcing, quote, "We don't want to become Arizona or Florida." As coronavirus cases spike across Florida, the outbreak has caught up with residents at one of America's biggest retirement communities there. Since the beginning of July, hospital admissions of residents at The Villages, a sprawling retirement community of 120,000 in Central Florida, have quadrupled. It's 4 times. As of last week, more than 1,100 COVID-19 cases were reported in and around the sprawling retirement community. The Villages had initially seemed to escape the worst of the virus, and at one time had been a point of pride for Republican Governor Ron DeSantis, who pushed back in April, brushing off concerns at the risk at the retirement community.
That's why you go to a place like The Villages. There were articles written saying, oh, The Villages is going to crash and burn, all this other stuff. They have like a 2.5% infection rate. We tested 1,200 asymptomatic, and none were found to have the virus. And
by early July, the infection rate at The Villages had jumped to 9%.
With Florida's cases rising faster than any other state in the country, many are now choosing to speak out against its policies and Governor Ron DeSantis. Other governors have cautioned that they do not want to be Florida when it comes to their response, and while DeSantis touted Florida's communities are doing great, now, senior communities like The Villages in Central Florida are basically burning as the infection spreads like wildfire. Republicans have been cautioned that these affected seniors could very well swing the election against Trump in November.
We just showed you his mocking remarks about the response in the villages. And those remarks approximately 45 days ago, in that everything was great in that retirement community, he is eating like bad crow today.
We have this massive community of elderly, which, by the way, are often Republican and also have a very high STD rate in that town, now are going to be dropping like flies as they are very susceptible to this. And that's going to hurt the Republican vote come November.
Old people need love too, you guys.
Next week, we're up our segment called Good News. Speaking of that, after we finish... Wait, did you make an old joke about me?
Not about you.
Okay.
Not everything is about you.
All right. After we finish our headlines, we want to report on something that made us smile today in Good News.
So now we queer up good news. Captain Tom is knighted by the Queen for COVID-19. Captain Tom stole our hearts when he walked to raise millions, and now he's been honored with a knighthood by the Queen, and that made us all smile big in today's good news. Watch this.
I'm absolutely overawed by the fact that this is such a high award that I should get, and from Her Majesty as well. What more can anyone wish for than that? That has been an absolutely magnificent day for me. Thank you very much.
I'm not sure if you can answer this question, but what's better, raising £30 million for charity or having the Queen break her lockdown to personally meet you?
Well, the money is very useful, but we've only one Queen, and we get a message from the Queen that there's no value can be placed on that. I think to meet the Queen was more than anyone could expect. I mean, it was... Never ever did I imagine that I should get so close to the Queen and have such a kind message from her. That was really outstanding. It really was truly outstanding.
Can you explain the message? What did she say?
No.
That's between you and
That's between the Queen and I, yes. That's I don't think I'd tell anybody what she said. It was just... the Queen and I speaking privately, and it was a great honour for me to be able to speak to her at all.
Raising funds for nonprofits is very important, and we ask that you donate to the hosts of our set, the World AIDS Museum and Education Center. The museum is in Wilt Manors in Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
We joke that we're coming from the gayest place on planet Earth.
We'd also like to thank our set designer, Concepto Modern Living, here in Fort Lauderdale for making this set in this living museum possible.
Tonight is part 19 of Q's Q&A on coronavirus and the LGBTQ community, July 21st. This special segment is designed to be unique in America to answer your questions about coronavirus for the LGBTQ community during this pandemic.
Tonight, we have an American pioneer in AIDS HIV medical treatment. With us is Dr. Howard Grossman, specialist in internal medicine with an emphasis on HIV. He was the executive director of the American Academy of HIV Medicine. He's become nationally recognized as an educator on HIV issues and is an advocate for LGBTQ civil rights and the rights of our community.
And of course, he has become the medical expert during pandemic for Queer News Tonight. Welcome this evening, Dr. Grossman. And before we get into viewer questions, of course, as I've said for 19 consecutive weeks, it's been another big week for science and the medical community. Before we take any of our viewer questions, I just want to ask you, what's on your mind this week about COVID-19?
Well, Al, I think a couple of things. I mean, first of all, we've had some good news in terms of some treatment advances. We talked weeks ago about the use of interleukin-6 to suppress the immune response that's so much a part of the second phase of coronavirus, and that really is what is eating up people's lungs and kidneys and everything else after the initial viral infection. And they've now come up with an inhaled version of interleukin-6. IL-6 is something that we've used in multiple sclerosis for the last several years, so it's not a new drug, but this is a new use for it. So, that suppression is helpful. The inhaled goes right to the lungs and may actually help people who are really seriously short of breath. So that was good news. We had some good news on the vaccine front in terms of the phase 2 trials of several vaccines in England, one in England, one in China, that seemed to be stimulating a good immune response. Now, we take that as good news, but I think, and the stock market, of course, took it as very good news, but I think that these stock market people are nuts because they respond to every little thing, and then when things don't work out, they crash everything. Having a good immune response in the short term doesn't tell us that it will last in the long term, doesn't tell us if there will be new side effects down the line that weren't found in a short-term study. So I'm excited that they're moving into phase 3, but we'll wait.
I'm curious. Before we jump into viewer questions today, this evening, Trump, I haven't seen it yet, but Trump likely is going to go on for hours, is the relaunch of the White House Coronavirus Commission daily briefings. What are your thoughts about what we're getting ready to see all over again? He hasn't done it since April.
It'll be a dog and pony show. I mean, the big thing is whether they will keep him out of the press conferences. That's apparently been a big debate, whether to hold them off-site so that he's not barging in and taking over. But you know what? I mean, the people running this, Mike Pence, Deborah Birx. I mean, Deborah Birx has shown her true Trumpian colors in all this. It turns out she's behind much of the push to reopen schools and things like that. She has her modeling things that she does that aren't necessarily accurate. Even the models that she uses, the people who made those models said they shouldn't be used for this. I think she's really ruined her reputation across the board.
Yeah, I'm watching memes that says Birx is no Fauci. That's
really true. Tony Fauci is one of the smartest people I've ever met in my life. When he lectures on HIV, the whole world listens. I mean, I can tell you, having met him, seen him at conferences over the years, and he is a dedicated public servant. There really is nobody like him, I mean, truthfully.
Interesting, I heard him remark to a reporter's question, are you participating in the daily White House briefings? And he goes, well, I would assume I am, but nobody had asked him yet. Interesting. So let's jump right into our viewer questions.
Let's do that.
David, let's begin with you.
A viewer asked, Florida mitigation has failed with 10,000 new cases a day. What should we do next?
What we should do next, first of all, is get rid of Ron DeSantis, who's still manipulating the numbers here, still trying to be mini Trump, still making things up as he goes along. I don't know how these people lie to the camera with a straight face.
We can just say that now, can't we? They just lie.
They lie.
Period, the end.
They
We
lie.
try to be polite about it. We went a long time trying to give benefit of the doubt, but they're just lying, period.
Right. Exactly. And they do this. I can only imagine, when you think of A Christmas Carol, what kind of change they're forging for the afterlife. They're going to make Marley's ghost look like he's got spaghetti attached.
Wow.
I mean, this is really, so that's number one. Number two, the mask wearing. Okay, it needs to be mandatory. I traveled to New Orleans last weekend, and I will tell you that here in Fort Lauderdale, the airport was deserted. I've never ever. It's like a fantasy if you're a frequent traveler to have nobody there, but almost everybody was wearing a mask. Pretty much everybody. And when we got to Houston,
I saw your picture.
We got pretty much everybody was wearing a mask. Coming back from New Orleans, I would say a little less than a quarter of the people actually didn't have masks on. We're sitting there at the gate with no masks on. Big signs everywhere, masks, Now, getting on the plane, they all had to have masks. There was one woman who wanted to get on without a mask. They wouldn't let her. So bravo, United. But nobody was policing the gate area. And all these people didn't have masks on. Now, I felt safe because I had my mask on. And I wasn't sitting anywhere near these people. But clearly, thanks to Trump, I mean, and really, he could put a mask on now, but the cat is out of the bag. These people have taken up this idea that this is their liberty, and really, it's the mask.
They've turned it into a political issue that can't be overcome now.
And I heard a story about a friend of one of my patient's bosses who came down from Birmingham, Alabama, to see what was going on down here. Brought his family, but they drove, so they didn't have to fly. Going through Jacksonville, Tallahassee, coming down, stopping at rest stops, and they were the only people in the place wearing masks. And people actually told them, "You don't need to wear a mask here. Take that off." Okay, so this is the divide in this country, and it is serious. So I think truthfully, so that's what we need to do. People need to wear masks. I think at my gym today, here in Fort Lauderdale, everybody has to wear a mask at the gym now. I knew this was coming for weeks, and I've been wearing one myself, but there were probably 8 or 9 people who had the mask down below their nose. Well, honey, that don't work. I don't want to know where the gym owner was to stop those people from doing that, because otherwise he's going to get shut down. We're going to end up in another shutdown. LA is on the verge. There are other cities that are on the verge of re-shutting down. I despair.
The two things that I hear you clearly on, we have to vote and replace our politicians that have not supported our lives and our livelihood. DeSantis is still several years away from being able to do that, so we're not going to replace him in Florida this year. And we need to wear a mask regardless of what anyone else does. Is there anything that we can do that will, I guess, is the only issue whether we protect ourselves now? Is that the only issue left?
I think we're at that point. I despair a bit because, for example, in my complex, we have an out-of-control board chair who wants residents to spy on each other. This is not the time to turn this into Nazi Germany and every little person is a Gestapo agent or the KGB. I think this is the time for us to come together and support one another. Wearing a mask is a new social norm. We've said this before. It takes time to develop a new social norm. I mean, truthfully, I think we need to start, our government needs to start fining people who violate the rules, hand them a ticket for $250.
Do you think there's any chance of that happening?
I think there is in some places.
I believe it was Fort Lauderdale Borough just implemented $500 fine.
Right, but there need to be, ticket people, like the ticket people in New York who go around with their little handheld things and issue the ticket right there on the spot for $250 or $500.
It's certainly easy enough to issue parking tickets.
That's exactly the
We
same
live in
way.
Wilton Manors, and Fort Lauderdale parking tickets are a way of life for us.
Right, and you can't go to Ticket Clinic to get it fixed.
Yeah, exactly. One last related question. 19 weeks. Dr. Grossman, you've been doing this for 19 weeks. Do you feel any older?
I feel older anyway.
Yeah.
But you know what, Al? I mean, here's the thing. I think it has been one of the great disasters of this, that the powers that be and the media have been indulging in wishful thinking from the beginning that this was going to be a short-term problem. And we've talked about it here. This is going to be 2 or 3 years. I'm sorry, but they are not going to have a safe, effective, proven vaccine for a couple of years. Yeah. The measles, mumps, rubella vaccine was the fastest vaccine ever developed. Took 4 years. Yeah. Okay. It takes time to prove that there aren't any long-term effects, that it is active in the long term, things like that. So without that, we're going to be using these for a long time. We're going to have to figure out how to do restaurants and how to do some of the other things that we love for the long term.
To have any normalcy.
Right.
Misty, another viewer question.
I have a viewer question and a viewer statement. Infection is spread in respiratory droplets. How is it possible to have crowded school classrooms? And Dr. Vengupta said airplanes are safer than schools. Planes now refresh air every 5 minutes. School classrooms do not.
Right. So those are two separate things. So airplanes have HEPA filters. They really have been filtering the air for a long time. You have barriers. The seats are a barrier in front of you, as well as wearing masks. I mean, I'm not sure it's the safest place in the world, but it's certainly safer than other places where we are close to each other. Schools, many schools are antiquated, have poor ventilation systems. That's going to be a problem to retrofit those schools.
Cold weather, closed up.
Exactly. And can you get children to wear masks is a big question. Now, I think when you think about crowded situations, I say look at the Tokyo subway system, one of the most crowded subway systems in the world. And we've seen pictures during this epidemic of crowds in the Tokyo subway all wearing masks, and Japan's numbers have dropped through the floor. They've gone very, very low. So it really is about the masks, and I do think that we can be closer if we're all wearing masks.
But that, again, takes us back to your observations for the week. That requires political leadership, and it requires our buy-in to stop making politics an issue and wearing the mask.
And money.
And money.
And all of the richest people in this country have become much richer during this epidemic. I read something today that Jeff Bezos made $13 billion yesterday.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. If we need to look for money, there's the money. We could be taxing these people.
As it relates to schools, of course, America, as you know, this is an LGBT topic of conversation for COVID, and Dr. Grossman, very renowned in HIV, is a gay man, a gay doctor. If you had children, and there are many gay men and women that have children, if you had children, would you or if you had current school-age children, would you let them go to school next month?
Depends on the school. Depends on how the local school was dealing with it and what they were planning to do. Now, lots of large school systems have decided that they are going to be completely virtual until they can get things figured out. I think there are many others that are looking at doing a hybrid situation. I mean, certainly, in places with better weather, you can have open classrooms. I mean, certainly there are places all over the world where classrooms are, I think of where a friend of mine teaches in Brazil. Those classrooms are all open and have pull-down walls for when the weather isn't good. Those kind of creative solutions may be helpful. But right now, here in Broward County, where the numbers are so high, I support the school board that is looking to do virtual classes. I would not be sending my child back.
We get another, almost seems like every week, HIV questions. David, you have a viewer question?
Yes, a viewer sent this because you're an HIV doctor. How do you think COVID has and will affect HIV testing and care in the community? And do you think COVID-19 may lead to increased rates of HIV due to lack of public testing now?
Very complicated question. I think testing has become a real issue. Many of the health departments are so focused on COVID testing and so focused on the epidemic that they've actually shut down their HIV testing centers. I think that that's become a problem. And I would say that for many people are certainly not as sexually active and not doing hookups the way they were, but my patients are having sex. I mean, less partners than previously, but they're still having sex. They're still getting STDs. I think it's incumbent on physicians and healthcare providers to do as much testing as we can to let it be known where you can get an HIV test. We have to support the health departments, here in Florida especially, those health departments have often been starved for funds, and we need to be out here supporting the efforts to continue testing. So the question, if people are having less sex, hopefully more people on PrEP, will the HIV rates go up? I really don't know.
And specifically to your observation on testing, we had a very good question asked this week. Misty, you have about testing.
Yes, this viewer asked, why is the United States not using instant testing methods?
Well, the instant testing methods are not as reliable. I mean, these really need to go through testing. So many of them were allowed out by the FDA right away, and turned out to have tons of false positives, false negatives. They really were unreliable. So right now, the best testing platforms are the commercial labs. And they are overwhelmed. We can't get swabs from Quest because they are dedicating them for hospitals and government testing facilities who are overwhelmed. Apparently there was one factory in Italy that made the swabs back in March, but of course Italy was overwhelmed. And now there are 3 factories in the US that make them. We should have 20 factories in this country that make them. And this is Donald Trump's fault again. Not enough protective gear, not enough factories turning this stuff out. How hard is it to make a swab?
I want to make sure that I understand the observation you just made. The reliability factor of the instant tests, there's not enough machines to do it. Right.
Well, the instant tests are going to be finger sticks.
Oh,
and
okay.
They will develop, but they need to be tested and proven, and that takes time.
Well, it's been 6 months with the time lag. We are not making enough commitment to make instant testing possible.
Believe me, I'm sure there are plenty of companies that are doing everything they can to get those rapid tests done because they stand to make a lot of money if they come up with a winner. But they need to be tested and vetted, and you need to know what the accuracy of these tests is, and that's that's going to be important.
A viewer asked about COVID overall.
Yes, another viewer has asked. Some say the COVID-19 crisis is still in the early stages. Is this true?
Well, it's only been, what, 7-8 months. Yeah. So yes, I think it's the early stages because we're talking about something that's going to be around for years, and something we have to learn to accommodate and survive with. So yeah, this is the early stages.
That conclusion, you understand what you just said. That conclusion is, not only is it a bitter pill to swallow, it is almost incomprehensible for people in general, but for the LGBT community to think this has just started, it's almost unfathomable.
But Al, we are a very creative people. Look at the things we've talked about on this show. We've talked about how can drag queens do their shows in the middle of an epidemic. And so we talked about face shields. We talked about masks that are see-through that allow people to lip sync. We talked about, who's more creative than drag queens? Who could decorate those things better? We are a very creative community, and as Americans, we are a very creative people. I truly think that we can figure out how to save film festivals, how to save restaurants. Not everyone. There's a lot of pain here, and we need a government that's going to help us get through that pain and survive, which we don't have. But if people would focus on the fact that this is going to be around a while, then maybe they'd start thinking of these creative solutions.
One of your solutions that you talk about very clearly tonight is the power to vote, and that you go out and you make changes of the people that are important. Misty, we have a question about that specifically.
Yeah, and this is actually our last question. Are you personally satisfied with Joe Biden's proposed policies related to public health?
Well, let me say this first of all. Voting is going to be very important, and watching today about Brian Kemp in Atlanta, who's suing the mayor of Atlanta because she has a mask ordinance and also wants to stop her from having free speech and being able to talk to the press. I'm reminded that he is the king of voter suppression, having purged so many people from voter rolls in Georgia that he was able to win. Well, and of course, he was Secretary of State when he did that. And it made me wonder why these people are so anti-mask. And truly, I hate to be a conspiracy theorist, but it makes me wonder if this isn't the ultimate voter suppression. If you make sure to kill off large numbers of voters, especially in minority communities, especially in big cities like Atlanta, how much do you help the Republican cause? I know that that's a horrible thought, but truthfully, I feel that the opposition is genocidal at this point. And we're watching fascism raise its head over this country as Donald Trump has his private security forces go running around taking people off the streets. This is serious stuff. But your question was about Joe Biden's plan. So I actually brought that for you because I think you guys should do a story on this because I read it, and this is an amazing plan. The Democratic Party and Vice President Biden have come up with a plan that is a wraparound plan that deals with the infection itself, mobilizes every part of government to fight this infection, that deals with the economic fallout, is supporting the most vulnerable people, expanding Medicaid, Medicare for all, having a public option for people to buy into Medicare. On and on, supporting people who've lost their jobs, including people in the gig economy who don't have steady jobs. It really is amazing. And reestablishing ourselves as a global leader in fighting infections. So reestablishing the task force that the Obama administration set up to deal with global pandemics that Trump destroyed in 2018. Reestablishing within our government all of the places that were supposed to be fighting this epidemic that Trump has destroyed. It's going to take a while to do, but this is a really amazing plan to read through. And I challenge your viewers to go online and just Google, Biden plan for COVID-19, and you can see this yourself.
Well, Dr. Grossman, you challenge us to do a good review of that and, of course, incorporate you in that conversation. I give a heads up to our production team. We're getting ready to end our show tonight, and we're going to have our closing package in a moment. But I want to close this section of Q's Q&A and coronavirus by just reminding you the two big notes that that Dr. Howard Grossman makes tonight is that we have to be paying attention to our politicians and their decision making, and the number one issue here. And what has he taught all of us? He has taught us to wear our fucking mask. Exactly.
For weeks now.
So that's it for part 19 of Q's Q&A of coronavirus and the LGBTQ community. Every Tuesday night, we bring you viewer questions of the most important medical advice from our medical expert, Dr. Howard Grossman from Midway Specialty Care here in Wilton Manors, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, as we joke, the gayest place on planet Earth. Dr. Grossman, do you have any plans next Tuesday at 7 o'clock? Yes,
nope.
You do.
Be back.
As always, thank you, Dr. Grossman, for being with us tonight. We end the show by saying thank you. Tuesday night, the section that we just did on Q's Q&A and the coronavirus is very, very important. And we've done it for 19 consecutive weeks. We're here at Queer News tonight, every night at 7 o'clock, because we deliver the only live LGBTQ news show in the entire world. And we thank you for joining us. So we ask you to come back to us, tune in every night and tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Good night, America.